Ancient India holds more secrets than it might seem at first glance. Among the ruins of lost cities and majestic temples are hidden mysteries that still have no explanation. Here, Vedic legends, unsolved writings, incredible engineering structures, and myths about gods whose power seems to have left a trace in stone are intertwined. Each discovery poses new questions and breaks the usual understanding of history, revealing to us a world where the past and the mystical merge into one. The Unsolved Indian Script. When archaeologists first uncovered the ruins of the ancient cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro in the early 20th century, they expected to find traces of primitive Bronze Age settlements. But instead, they found a civilization with a level of organization that was astonishing. Geometrically verified streets, uniform brick standards, complex drainage systems, everything spoke of a well-thought-out urban culture. But the most surprising thing was that the inhabitants left behind a system of signs, carefully engraved on seals, tablets, and ceramics, which to this day remains one of the greatest mysteries of history. These signs are known as the Indus script. They are found everywhere, on small square soapstone seals, on fragments of pottery, on stone amulets. The number of symbols is small, only about 400, and this raises debate. Was it a full-fledged language or just a system of trademarks? A code understood only by merchants and priests. Some researchers see the beginnings of an alphabet in them, while others claim that we are looking at pictograms, where each sign denoted an object, idea, or name. But everyone agrees on one thing. The signs are repeated with a certain structure, which means that these are not random drawings, but a real writing system. Attempts to decipher the Indus script began 100 years ago. Scientists compared the signs with Sanskrit, ancient Dravidian languages, even with Sumerian writing, hoping to find parallels. Dozens of hypotheses were put forward. Some believed that the Indus people wrote down the names of rulers on seals, others that these were lists of goods or amulets with magical formulas, but there is no evidence. We have no Rosetta Stone for Harappa, no bilingual inscription that would help connect the mysterious signs with a known language. Each find only adds to the questions. For example, the seals often depict a mysterious unicorn, an animal with one horn next to which symbols are carved. What is it? A family coat of arms, a cult symbol, a city name, or a product code? In some cases, the signs are arranged in a strict sequence. In others, they seem random. The length of the inscriptions is usually small, from 3 to 10 symbols, and this also hinders deciphering. There is too little material to identify patterns. Some experts point out that writing disappeared along with the civilization itself around 1800 BC. This means that the writing system was closely tied to the culture and its institutions. When the cities were deserted due to climate change or other disasters, the signs lost their meaning, and the new population of India no longer used them. Thus, an entire tradition disappeared, leaving no legends about its meaning for descendants. Modern methods like computer analysis have also not yielded results yet. Algorithms identify repeating combinations of signs, but this is not enough to link them to real language. Some researchers believe that the script reflects an early Dravidian language, the descendants of which have survived in southern India. Others talk about the influence of Austroasiatic languages, but these are all assumptions. Even the most cautious publications end with the words, "There is no final answer." It is precisely this lack of an answer that makes the Indus script so compelling. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or the cuneiform of Mesopotamia, here we have a system of signs that seems to deliberately refuse to reveal itself. It remains on the border between art and text, between magic and trade. Each seal from Harappa or Mohenjo-daro is a tiny fragment of a foreign language, like a letter delivered from the distant past, but written in a code that no one understands anymore. There are also bolder theories. Some believe that writing could have been connected with rituals, meaning that understanding its signs was only available to a narrow circle of priests. Others believe that it was a form of proto-writing, a system of symbols for managing the economy that never developed into a full-fledged language. There are even versions that these signs were a kind of sacred code, and therefore were deliberately made incomprehensible to ordinary people. Yet even this silence has its power. The Indus script reminds us that human history is not a straight line of progress, with each step leading to the next. Sometimes entire civilizations created systems that disappeared without leaving any heirs. For the Harappans, these signs may have been as obvious and simple as the letters of the alphabet for us. But for us, they have become an impenetrable wall behind which a world long since sunk into the sand is hidden. Every new artifact, every seal found by archaeologists seems to challenge modernity. We can send satellites into the sky, build quantum computers, but we still cannot understand a simple inscription on clay made more than 4,000 years ago. This is the greatness of mystery. Ancient India has left us not only monuments, but also a riddle that tests the limits of our knowledge and reminds us that the past may be deeper and more complex than we think. The mystery of Mohenjo-Daro and its perfect sewerage system. When archaeologists first excavated Mohenjo-Daro, an ancient Indus civilization city in what is now Pakistan, they encountered something that was hard to reconcile with the Bronze Age. What they found was not a chaotic settlement, but a carefully planned city whose structure is striking even today. Straight streets divided into blocks, houses of the same layout, stepped wells, and, most amazingly, a complex sewage system that even many medieval European cities did not have. The drainage network at Mohenjo-Daro was designed so that almost every house had access to a drain pipe. These pipes, made of baked bricks, led to common collectors, which led to the main channels that ran along the streets. The channels were covered with slabs so that they could be walked on, and there were special inspection holes for cleaning. Such a system requires a high level of organization and control, since its functioning required constant maintenance and coordination between residents. This sewerage system was not just an engineering achievement, but also a reflection of a certain way of life. At Mohenjo-Daro, concern for cleanliness and order seems to have been part of the overall ideology. Archaeologists have found numerous bathrooms, often brick-lined and equipped with drains. Some buildings had entire complexes for ablutions, and the famous Great Bath in the city center clearly served not only economic, but also ritual purposes. Water in this culture was perceived as a sacred element, and maintaining the cleanliness of the body and space was probably associated with religious ideas. But along with the admiration for this system comes a host of questions. How did the inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro achieve such a level of engineering thousands of years before similar systems appeared in other regions? Why did they not have monumental palaces and temples but had sewage systems available to almost every home? This suggests that the Indus civilization society was more balanced and oriented toward the collective good than many other ancient cultures. It is still unclear who exactly managed the construction and maintenance of this system. We have found no inscriptions, no names of rulers, no decrees that would explain how this process was organized. Unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt, where power was concentrated in kings and priests, the Harappan civilization seemed to avoid personal cults. Everything suggests that governance was decentralized, and the emphasis was on the practical needs of society. The disappearance of Mohenjo-Daro remains no less mysterious. By the end of the 2nd millennium BC, the city had fallen into decline, and its inhabitants abandoned their homes. There are many hypotheses, from a change in the course of the Indus River and droughts to invasions of nomadic tribes and epidemics, but none of them can definitively explain why such a developed system was abandoned. The destroyed streets and flooded canals seem to indicate the suddenness of the catastrophe. Some researchers point out that traces of a severe flood are found in the layers of destruction. Perhaps the elements themselves destroyed the system created to combat the water. But there are also bolder assumptions, that the Indus civilization possessed knowledge that we underestimate, and its decline is associated not only with natural factors but also with an internal crisis that we cannot yet understand. Today, Mohenjo-Daro stands before us as a silent monument. Streets that stretch into emptiness, brick walls that once teemed with life, and the remains of canals where water roared. All this reminds us that the level of a civilization is measured not only by monuments and armies, but also by how much it cared for the daily needs of its inhabitants. The sewer system of Mohenjo-Daro remains a mystery, not because we do not understand its structure, but because we cannot explain how the people of the Bronze Age were able to create it on such a scale. It is evidence that ancient India hides within itself experience and knowledge that has not yet been fully revealed to the modern world. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, ritual or engineering phenomenon. Among the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, a special place is occupied by a structure known as the Great Bath. It is located in the very center of the citadel, next to the grand buildings, which in itself speaks of its significance. At first glance, it is simply a large pool, about 12 meters long, 7 meters wide, and more than 2 meters deep. But on closer inspection, it becomes obvious that we are looking at something much more than a household device. The walls of the Great Bath are made of baked bricks, carefully fitted together, and bitumen resin was used for sealing. There are steps on the sides leading down, so that people could safely go down into the water and up again. On both sides there were small rooms, probably intended for undressing or preparation for the ritual. Water was supplied through a complex system of wells and channels, and was also carefully drained outside. Archaeologists found no traces of stagnation or flooding. Why build such a massive and expensive structure? Given its scale and location, most researchers are inclined to believe that the bathhouse had ritual significance. In the Indus civilization, cleanliness of the body and water was not only a hygienic practice, but also a spiritual one. Bathing could symbolize renewal, purification before important ceremonies, and the unification of the community. Collective rituals related to the calendar, the change of seasons, or religious holidays may have taken place here. But there is also a practical side. The Great Bath could serve as a social center where city residents would gather. It became not only a place for ablutions, but also a space for communication, exchanging news, and strengthening ties. In this sense, it was no less important than modern squares or markets. However, many mysteries remain. We do not know what gods or powers these rituals were dedicated to. There are no texts in the Harappan writing that could be read and confirm the hypotheses. Iconography also does not provide direct answers. Images on seals and ceramics only hint at the cult of fertility, animals, and nature, but do not reveal details. There are also alternative versions. Some researchers believe that the bathhouse could have been used for education, a kind of cleanliness school, where children learned the rules of hygiene from an early age. Others talk about a political symbol. The structure, located in the citadel, could emphasize power and order, demonstrating control over water as a key resource. The fact of engineering perfection itself remains important. The water that entered the bath did not stagnate, but was constantly renewed. This required a complex network of wells, filtration, and maintenance. For the Bronze Age, such a solution looks unusually progressive. It proves that the inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro not only built cities, but also created entire systems, where every detail served both practical and spiritual purposes. As the Indus civilization declined, the Great Bath gradually filled with sand and earth, becoming a silent testimony to the past. But even in ruins, it is still striking. Looking at the remaining steps and walls, it is difficult to shake the feeling that something more than ordinary ablutions took place here. This was a space where the sacred and the mundane intertwined, where water connected people with each other and with higher powers. Today, the Great Bath is considered a symbol of Mohenjo-Daro and one of the most mysterious buildings of ancient India. It reminds us that for the inhabitants of that civilization, purity had not only a physical but also a spiritual meaning. And for us, the question remains: what exactly happened within its walls? What rituals united people in this stone pool? And why, after millennia, we still feel the power of its silent presence? Unicorn on Harappan seals. Among the thousands of seals found at Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and other cities of the Indus civilization, one that is particularly common is the image of a mysterious animal that archaeologists call the unicorn. On these small square amulets we see a figure with a body similar to a bull or zebu, but with one long horn pointing forward. Next to the image there is almost always a short inscription of incomprehensible symbols, and in front of the animal there is some object, either a sacrificial table or a vessel. These seals were used as a kind of signature or trademark. Their impressions are found on clay, and they probably serve to control trade, property, or ritual actions. But why exactly did the inhabitants of Harappa need to depict a fantastic beast? After all, archaeology knows of no evidence of the existence of one-horned animals in South Asia. One hypothesis claims that this is not a unicorn at all, but a stylized image of a bull in profile. The craftsman could have combined the two horns into one line to simplify the drawing. But this argument is weak because the image is repeated hundreds of times in different cities, and always in the same form. Such constancy speaks more of a symbol than of an accident. Some researchers see the unicorn as a mythical creature associated with the cult of fertility or sacrificial rituals. They interpret the vessel in front of the beast as an altar where gifts were placed. In this case, unicorn seals were not just trademarks, but signs of belonging to a particular cult or community. This also explains why this motif was so widespread. It reflected a common religious tradition. There is another version. The unicorn could be an emblem of the ruling elite or a trade guild. In ancient times, animals were often used as symbols of power. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, there are images of lions, bulls, eagles, which were associated with strength and power. Perhaps in the Indus civilization, the role of such a sign was played by the unicorn, an animal that does not exist in nature and therefore emphasizes exclusivity and special status. Of particular interest is the combination of the image with the inscriptions. The symbols next to the unicorn could indicate the name of the owner of the seal, the clan, or even the purpose of the object. But since the Harappan script has not yet been deciphered, we can only guess. Some cryptographers have tried to identify repeating combinations, but so far without success. There is an even bolder hypothesis that the unicorn symbolized not an animal, but an idea. One horn extended forward could mean unity, strength, or direction of will. Such a sign could serve as a reminder of harmony, the power of a single force, or even the connection of man with the divine. In this sense, it is closer to an abstract symbol than to the image of a specific creature. Interestingly, images of one-horned animals appear in other cultures as well. In Mesopotamia, there are images of bulls with one horn, and in ancient Indian texts of later times, a mystical animal, the Rishyabha, with one horn is described. Perhaps the Harappan unicorn was part of a larger tradition of symbols that later transformed into unicorn myths that spread around the world. For the inhabitants of ancient cities, such seals had a practical meaning. They could be used to seal a vessel with grain or fabrics, confirm ownership, or reflect participation in a trade deal. But each of these small stones also contained an image filled with a religious and cultural meaning. Today we see it as a mystery, but for the Harappans it could have been an everyday and understandable sign. Ultimately, the unicorn seals are more than just artifacts. They are key to understanding how the Indus Valley civilization thought and constructed its world. They point to a complex symbolic system in which even a fictional animal could carry important ideas. And while the writing remains unsolved, it is precisely these images that become our main source of knowledge about the faith and worldview of the people who, more than 4,000 years ago, created cities whose secrets we still have not unraveled. Pashupati seal, an early image of Shiva or a forgotten lord. Among the most famous artifacts of the Indus civilization, the seal known as the Pashupati seal stands out. It was found in Mohenjo-daro and immediately attracted attention with its unusual image. On a small square piece of soapstone is engraved a figure sitting in a yoga pose, surrounded by animals. The figure has 3 faces, a horned headdress on its head, arms spread out to the sides, and around it are a tiger, a rhinoceros, a buffalo, and an elephant. Before us is not just a decorative scene, but, judging by the details, an image associated with the cult of power over animals and the forces of nature. The name Pashupati is not accidental. In Sanskrit, this word means Lord of Beasts, and traditionally refers to the god Shiva. Some Indologists believe that it is here that we see the oldest image of this deity, even before it took shape in the Hindu tradition. The yogic pose, 3-faced appearance, and the surrounding wild animals really do echo the later iconographic motifs of Shiva. Archaeologists, however, argue. Some say it is clear evidence that Hinduism's roots go back to the Indus civilization. Others argue that the seal's image cannot be directly linked to a specific god who emerged thousands of years later. It may have been a local priest or a hunting spirit whom we mistakenly identify with Shiva. The mystery of the seal is further enhanced by its unique composition. Unlike numerous seals with a unicorn or bulls, this one depicts an entire scene with multi-layered symbolism. This suggests that the authors sought to convey something more than just a sign. What we are probably looking at is a reflection of a religious worldview, where a person or deity was at the center of nature and had power over the animal world. An important detail remains the yogic pose. The figure sits with a straight back, bent knees and feet joined together. This resembles the well-known asanas used in meditation. If the seal does indeed indicate the existence of such practices as early as the 3rd millennium BCE, this would radically change our understanding of the origins of yoga. Perhaps its origins go back not only to the Vedic culture, but also to even more ancient layers of the Indus civilization. The animal symbolism also raises questions. Each of the animals has its own character and meaning. The tiger is associated with strength and wildness, the elephant with wisdom and power, the rhinoceros and buffalo with the earth and fertility. Together, they form a panorama of wild nature, emphasizing that the central figure controls the entire animal world. This echoes the idea of Pashupati, the lord of living beings. But there remains a skeptical point of view. Some scientists believe that we are too eager to see in ancient artifacts what is familiar to us. Perhaps the inhabitants of Mohenjo-daro did not share our ideas about gods at all. For them, this scene could have meant not religion, but social status. Perhaps it was a depiction of a ruler demonstrating power over nature and people, or a symbol of shamanic practice where a person connected with the spirits of animals. The ambiguity creates space for myths and interpretations. The Pashupati seal has become one of the key arguments for proponents of the theory of deep continuity between the Indus civilization and Hinduism. It is also used in arguments that yoga and meditation arose much earlier than previously thought. But until we have a decipherment of the Indus script, the seal remains a mute testimony that can be interpreted in dozens of ways. Today, this tiny seal is kept in museums and copied in countless textbooks on the history of religions. Its photograph has flown around the world, and every time it is looked at, the same question arises. Is this an early Shiva, the spiritual forerunner of one of India's major traditions? Or a forgotten god whose name and cult disappeared along with the civilization? There is no answer, but its power lies precisely in this uncertainty. It reminds us that ancient India holds layers of beliefs that cannot be reduced to simple patterns. Unidentified Soma from Rig Veda. Among the many mysteries of ancient India, a special place is occupied by a mysterious drink which in the sacred hymns of the Rig Veda is praised as a source of strength, inspiration, and even immortality. It was called Soma. Dozens of hymns were composed about it. It was compared to a deity and was considered an obligatory element of rituals. But the most amazing thing about this story is that we still do not know what exactly was hidden behind this name, and what plant was used to prepare the drink that could cause sacred awe in ancient people. In hymns, Soma is described as something that gives wisdom, vigor, and clarity of mind. It was drunk by priests and warriors, seeking to connect with the gods and gain supernatural energy. Sometimes the drink was compared to a living being that flows through the veins and fills the body with divine power. The preparation process itself was shrouded in mystery. The stems of the plant were pounded with stones. The juice was filtered through wool filters and mixed with milk or honey. The resulting liquid was then poured into a sacrifice to the gods and eaten during the ritual. However, the question of what plant served as the basis for Soma remains unresolved. Archaeologists and botanists have put forward dozens of versions. Some believe that it was ephedra, a plant containing substances that stimulate the nervous system. Others suggest that Soma could be prepared from the red fly agaric, which has a psychoactive effect, known in the shamanic traditions of Siberia. There are versions about hemp, about poppies, about rare types of mountain herbs that are now difficult to find. Each hypothesis has supporters and critics, but none has been confirmed definitively. The difficulty is that the descriptions in the Vedas are poetic and metaphorical. They speak of a golden juice, a bubbling drink, force flowing in the veins, but do not give specific botanical characteristics. Moreover, the Soma plant may have been unique to that time and region. Perhaps it grew only in the highlands where the priests reached and eventually disappeared. Then Soma was lost to subsequent generations, surviving only in texts. There's also a cultural explanation. Perhaps it was not the drink itself that was important, but the ritual itself. The process of preparing and drinking together created a sense of unity and exaltation, which was enhanced by a belief in divine power. In this case, searching for a specific plant makes no sense. Soma was a symbol of sacred experience, not a chemical. Nevertheless, the mystery continues to excite minds. After all, if we could accurately determine the composition of the drink, we would receive the key to understanding the religious life of ancient Indians. This would reveal the secret of their mystical experiences and help explain why this particular ritual was central to the entire Vedic tradition. It is curious that in Iranian culture there was a similar drink called hauma. It was also considered sacred. Zoroastrian priests drank it, and its cult has a striking resemblance to the Indian one. This gives grounds to assume that Soma and hauma have a common Proto-Indo-European root, and the cult of the drink existed even before the division of peoples. But here too, we do not know what plant was hidden behind the image of living juice. Today, Soma remains a symbol of lost knowledge. Archaeologists, linguists, ethnobotanists seek it, but it always eludes, dissolving between the lines of hymns and legends. Perhaps this is the main secret. Soma was never meant to be fully revealed. It was a sign that united myth and reality, an experience and a symbol at the same time. Even today, we look at these lines from the Rig Veda as a letter from the distant past. It promises a touch of immortality, but leaves us with only guesses. And Soma itself remains one of the great mysteries of ancient India, a drink that could be both a real potion and a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment, and a lost part of a culture that defies deciphering. Lothal and his mysterious duck. In the middle of the last century, archaeologists, exploring the lands of the state of Gujarat in India, discovered the ruins of the ancient city of Lothal. It belonged to the Indus civilization and immediately amazed researchers with its planning. Straight streets, warehouses for goods, complex water channels, But the most mysterious discovery was a rectangular pool more than 200 meters long and 35 meters wide. Scientists have long argued whether this was a dock for ships or a giant water reservoir. The first version seems logical. Lothal was located near the coast of the Arabian Sea and could have been an important trading port. If we assume that the pool was a dock, then ships departed from here, transporting goods to Mesopotamia and other regions. This is indicated by the finds of beads, seals, and artifacts, clearly connecting the city with foreign trade. The system of locks allowed the water level to be regulated, which corresponded to the tasks of maritime navigation. However, the geographical conditions raised doubts. Today, Lothal is located far from the coast, and even taking into account ancient changes in the riverbeds and the sea line, the distance seems too great. Some researchers believe that the pool could have been not a dock, but a grandiose reservoir. In this case, it would have provided the city with fresh water and protected it from seasonal droughts. The complex canals and dams around Lothal indeed confirm that the inhabitants were able to control water with amazing precision. But there is a third point of view. Perhaps the structure served several functions at once. Part of it was used for economic needs, and part for trade. This is supported by the fact that warehouses and workshops were located near the pool, where the famous Indus beads from carnelian and agate were produced. Finished goods could be stored there and quickly sent by water to consumers. Lothal's mystique is heightened by the fact that it was a true center of technology. Microscopic beads, less than a millimeter in diameter, have been found here, crafted with such precision that even modern craftsmen are amazed. Archaeologists have found the remains of kilns, tools for drilling stone, and even primitive scales. All of this indicates that Lothal was not only a port, but also an industrial hub from where goods were distributed throughout the region. And yet the question of the purpose of the dock remains open. If it is indeed a port facility, then it is one of the oldest examples of maritime infrastructure in history. But if it is a reservoir, then it testifies to the incredible engineering skills of the inhabitants of the Indus civilization, who knew how not only to build cities, but also to provide them with water, even in changing climates. The reason Lothal fell into decline is attributed to the changing river courses and flooding. Perhaps it was the water that the inhabitants had so skillfully managed that became their enemy. The canals silted up, the warehouses collapsed, and the dock ceased to perform its functions. The city gradually emptied, leaving only ruins and mysteries to descendants. Today, Lothal is an archaeological site that continues to pose questions to historians. Its dock remains a symbol of ambiguity. Some see it as evidence that the Indus Valley civilization mastered maritime trade on a level unmatched by other Bronze Age cultures, while others see it as evidence that the inhabitants harnessed the elements of water to survive in an arid climate. Whichever version turns out to be true, one thing is clear. Lothal was a city ahead of its time. Its inhabitants not only built houses and roads, but also created systems that supported the life of an entire community. And its mysterious dock is a reminder that ancient India still has many secrets that have yet to be uncovered. Rakhigarhi and the genetic secrets of the Harappans. Among the many archaeological sites of the Indus civilization, a special place is occupied by Rakhigarhi, the largest of the known cities of this culture, located in the territory of the modern state of Haryana in India. Its area is almost twice as large as the famous Mohenjo-Daro, and numerous excavations show that one of the main centers of the Harappan civilization was located here. But Rakhigarhi is interesting not only for its scale. It was here that discoveries were made that for the first time allowed scientists to look into the genetic past of the mysterious people who inhabited India more than 4,000 years ago. Until recently, the origins and cultural connections of the Harappans remained the subject of heated debate. Who were they? Were they Westerners with ties to ancient Iranian cultures? Or were they indigenous to India, whose traditions later merged with a Vedic civilization? Archaeology provided only indirect answers, but in Rakhigarhi, they managed to find what was sorely lacking: well-preserved human remains suitable for DNA analysis. In 2019, an international team of scientists published the results of a study of the genome of a woman who lived in Rakhigarhi around 2500 BCE. The findings were a bombshell. The woman's genetic profile, it turned out, did not match that of the nomadic herders of the Eurasian steppes, long thought to be the ancestors of Indians. Instead, it showed deep connections to ancient Iranian farmers and local South Asian hunter-gatherers. These findings challenge the previously popular hypothesis that the decline of the Indus civilization was caused by the invasion of Aryans from the steppes. It turned out that the Harappans lived in the cultural and genetic continuum of South Asia, and although they certainly had contacts with the outside world, the basis of their identity was formed within the region. This discovery has become one of the key arguments in the modern debate about the origins of Indian civilization. But the mystery remains. The genome of just one person cannot fully describe the complex ethnic makeup of an entire people. New remains continue to be found at Rakhigarhi, and each new sample adds to the picture. Some results confirm a connection with Iranian farmers, others show a more complex mix. The Indus civilization may have been a mosaic of communities, each with its own roots and traditions. Beyond its genetics, Rakhigarhi is striking in its organization. Archaeologists have found wide streets, grain warehouses, and complex drainage systems, all of which attest to a high level of organization. Gold and semi-precious stone ornaments were found, indicating wealth and extensive trade. However, there are almost no traces of military fortifications, weapons, or mass graves after battles. This makes one wonder. Maybe the Harappan civilization was not really built on military force, but on trade, crafts, and a system of resource distribution. Rakhigarhi also raises the question of the reasons for the decline. Why was such a powerful center abandoned? Climate change probably played a role. The drying up of rivers, changes in monsoons, which made life in the city impossible. But even here, not everything is clear. The layers of later times show traces of decline, but archaeologists have not recorded complete destruction or a sudden catastrophic event. Today, Rakhigarhi remains an archaeological site where the past is slowly revealing its secrets. Every bone, every fragment of DNA helps reconstruct the history of a people who left no written records, but gave the world cities, architecture, and culture that were ahead of their time. Genetic research has only opened the first door. Behind it lies a labyrinth of questions about who we are and where we come from. Dholavira, water architecture and giant inscriptions. On the western edge of India, in the desert region of Kutch, lie the ruins of Dholavira, one of the largest and most enigmatic cities of the Indus civilization. It was only discovered in the late 20th century, but has since become a key site for understanding the engineering and cultural achievements of the Harappans. Unlike other settlements lost among rivers and fertile plains, Dholavira existed in the harsh desert conditions, where water was always worth its weight in gold. It is here that archaeologists have found an amazing system of water architecture that amazes with its complexity and scale. Dholavira sat between two seasonal riverbeds that turned into torrents during the monsoons and were almost completely dry the rest of the time. To survive in these conditions, the city's inhabitants developed a unique system of canals, reservoirs, and dams. They collected rainwater, channeled it into huge artificial pools, and stored it for the dry months. These tanks were lined with stone to prevent water from seeping through, and their size is astounding. Some were over 100 meters long. All this gives the impression that the people of Dholavira thought like true hydraulic engineers, understanding the value of every flow and every drop. Water was not just a resource in Dholavira. Its control became the basis of power and organization of the city. Central reservoirs were located near the citadel, where the ruling elite probably lived. This emphasizes that access to water was linked to social structure and perhaps to religious rituals. After all, for the Harappans, water had a sacred meaning, symbolizing purification and renewal. But the water architecture is only part of the mystery of Dholavira. Another striking element is the giant inscription discovered by archaeologists at the entrance to the city. It consisted of 10 signs of the Indus script, written on large stone slabs. Each symbol was nearly as tall as a human being, and the entire structure could be seen from afar. For a civilization whose writing is usually found on tiny seals and tablets, this discovery was a sensation. What did this inscription mean? Scientists are still debating. Perhaps it was the name of the city or a sacred word intended for protection. Some believe that the inscription served as a kind of signboard, demonstrating to visitors the greatness of the city and its culture. But the most intriguing thing is that it confirms that the Indus script was used not only for economic purposes, but also had public significance. Unfortunately, since the language has not yet been deciphered, the meaning of these giant symbols remains a mystery. The structure of Dholavira also sets it apart from other Harappan centers. The city had 3 clearly demarcated parts: the citadel, the middle town, and the lower town. This layout indicates a well-thought-out social organization. The houses were built of stone, which distinguishes Dholavira from most other settlements where brick predominated. This made the buildings more durable and impressive. Despite the harsh climate, the city flourished for many centuries. Ornaments, pottery, toys, and seals have been found here. testifying to a rich cultural life. But around 1500 BC, Dolavira fell into decline. The main reason is considered to be a sharp change in climate. The rivers dried up, the monsoons became weaker, and even the complex system of reservoirs could no longer support life. People gradually abandoned the city, and it turned into ruins covered by sand. Today, Dolavira is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and continues to amaze archaeologists. Its water architecture remains a testament to the fact that even in the Bronze Age, humans were able to solve incredibly complex engineering problems. And a giant inscription holds the secret of a language that could reveal not only the history of the city, but the fate of an entire civilization. Iron Pillar in Delhi, timeless metal. In the very heart of the Indian capital, on the territory of the ancient Qutb complex, stands a structure that has excited the imagination of scientists and travelers for centuries. This is the famous Iron Pillar in Delhi, erected around the 4th to 5th centuries AD, and which has come down to us almost in its original form. More than 7 meters high and weighing about 6 tons, it looks like an ordinary monument. But it is its unique properties that have made it one of the greatest archaeological wonders of India. The main mystery of the column is that it is practically not subject to corrosion. Over 1,500 years, only a thin protective layer has formed on its surface, which on the contrary, protects the metal from destruction. For any archaeologist, this seems impossible because even modern steel structures rust in just decades. But the column remains strong, despite the rain, heat, temperature changes, and polluted air of the metropolis. Scientists have long tried to explain this phenomenon. Some believe that the secret was in the special composition of the iron. Analysis showed that the column consists almost entirely of high-purity wrought iron, with a very low content of sulfur and manganese, which makes it less vulnerable to corrosion. In addition, the alloy contains phosphorus, which promotes the formation of a thin passive film on the surface of the metal. This film became a natural shield, protecting the column from destruction for centuries. Other researchers emphasize the role of ancient forging technologies. The iron for the column was smelted not in furnaces, but in primitive furnaces, where the metal formed in the form of porous pieces. Then they were repeatedly reforged and joined, creating a monolith. This method of processing, unlike modern smelting, left a special structure in the metal that was better able to resist corrosion. But the question remains, where did the masters of that era get such knowledge? After all, most civilizations, even those with developed metallurgy, failed to achieve such a result. This suggests that Indian blacksmiths possessed secrets that were later lost. Legends also surround the column. According to legend, it was erected in honor of King Chandragupta II of the Gupta dynasty. Other versions claim that the column was part of an ancient temple dedicated to Vishnu and served as a symbol of victory and power. In the Middle Ages, people believed that the column had mystical powers. If you hugged it from behind and clasped your hands, your wish would come true. Today, this ritual is prohibited to protect the surface of the metal, but the memory of it lives on in legends. The column has survived not only time, but also people. In different eras, mosques and temples were built around it, rulers changed, dynasties collapsed, but it continued to stand. For historians, it is a symbol of continuity. For metallurgists, a challenge. For tourists, a miracle that you can touch with your own hands. Modern experiments have shown that it is extremely difficult to artificially recreate a metal with such properties. Even with the use of advanced technologies, it is only possible to partially reproduce the structure and stability of the column. This once again emphasizes the level of skill of ancient Indian blacksmiths, whose knowledge still exceeds our expectations from that era. Today, the Iron Pillar in Delhi is not only an archaeological site, but also a national symbol. It reminds us that India was the center of ancient metallurgy, where technologies ahead of their time were created, and its mysterious durability remains a reminder for us. Sometimes the simplest things hide the deepest secrets, which cannot be solved even after 1,500 years. Kailasanatha Temple at Ellora, a monolith carved from top to bottom. In the state of Maharashtra, not far from the city of Aurangabad, stands one of the most incredible monuments of ancient India, the Kailasanatha Temple, part of the famous Ellora cave complex. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt or the Greek temples, which were built from individual blocks, this structure is a single monolith carved from a single rock. The temple was literally carved from top to bottom, removing hundreds of thousands of tons of stone to create an architectural masterpiece of astonishing scale and detail. Work on the temple began in the 8th century under the ruler Krishna I of the Rashtrakuta dynasty. Legends claim that the construction was connected with the vow of the queen, who prayed for the health of her husband. The architect allegedly promised to build the temple in a week, starting from the top and working his way down so that the queen could see the completed spire and end her hunger strike. Of course, this is just a legend, but it reflects the amazing construction method. The craftsman really did start from the top of the cliff and gradually carved out the entire building, as if freeing it from the rock mass. The temple is striking in its size. Its height exceeds 30 meters, its length is more than 80, and its width is about 50. Inside, there is a spacious courtyard surrounded by a colonnade, and in the center rises the main temple dedicated to the god Shiva. The entire complex is decorated with sculptures, figures of gods, demons, mythical animals. Scenes from the Mahabharata and Ramayana are carved directly into the stone. Each detail is made with amazing precision, despite the fact that the craftsman worked with simple tools. The engineering aspect raises no fewer questions than the artistic one. According to archaeologists, more than 400,000 tons of stone had to be removed to create the temple. Even if the work lasted for several decades, it would have required incredible coordination and the labor of thousands of craftsmen. But the most amazing thing is the symmetry and precision. There could be no mistake. Unlike construction from blocks, where a failed element can be replaced, in a monolith any miscalculation would mean a catastrophe. Scientists are still debating how exactly the craftsmen accomplished the task. Some believe that they used a system of marking and sequential removal of rock, while others suggest that the key role was played by the strict organization of labor and the tradition of passing on experience from generation to generation. There are also bolder hypotheses, that the temple is a legacy of more ancient technologies, or even a trace of a lost civilization, whose knowledge exceeded the capabilities of its time. Kailasanatha is not just an architectural object, it carries deep symbolism. The very name Kailasanatha refers to the sacred mountain Kailas, the abode of Shiva. The temple was meant to embody the mythological cosmos. The courtyard symbolized the earth, the central tower the sacred mountain, and the sculptures told stories of the struggle between gods and demons, of order and chaos. Thus, the temple was not only a place of worship, but also a stone encyclopedia of the beliefs of its time. Over time, the temple has survived destruction. In the 17th century, the troops of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb tried to destroy it, but in 3 years they were only able to damage part of the sculptures. The monolith turned out to be too strong to break. This fact only strengthens the feeling that before us is not just a temple, but a real challenge of time. Today, Kailasanatha is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and remains one of India's greatest mysteries. Its scale, construction technology, and artistic richness place it among the world's greatest wonders. But along with the admiration, it leaves many questions. How are the proportions calculated so precisely? How are the colossal volumes of stone removed and hauled away? Why was this particular form, from top to bottom, chosen? We don't have answers yet, but that's the power of Kailasanatha. It remains an unsolved page of history, a monument that both inspires and confuses. Acoustic phenomena of the Ajanta Caves. Situated in the state of Maharashtra, amidst dense jungle and jagged cliffs, are the Ajanta Caves, one of the most impressive monuments of Indian art. These Buddhist monasteries and temples, carved into basalt rock, date back to the 2nd century BC and continue to amaze researchers not only with their paintings and sculptures, but also with their acoustic properties. It seems that ancient architects knew how sound works and consciously used this knowledge to create a spiritual experience. The Ajanta Caves consist of 2 types of rooms: the Chaitya Griha, a high-vaulted prayer hall with a stupa in the center, and the Vihara, the monastic cells and living quarters. The prayer halls are especially interesting. Entering such a hall, a person immediately notices an unusual effect. Sound here is not distributed as in ordinary rooms. A whisper near the wall can be heard in another part of the hall, and blows or singing create a long resonance. This effect is not accidental. The shape of the ceilings and the arrangement of the columns create an ideal acoustic system. When monks gathered in the hall and began choral singing, the effect was multiplied many times over. The voices merged into a single stream of sound, filling the space and creating a sense of mystical presence. The sound vibrated in the stone, reflected from the columns and returned back, strengthening the prayer. For a person inside, this was not just listening, but a deep spiritual experience, where vibration became part of meditation. Some researchers believe that ancient masters could intuitively understand the physics of sound. They created spaces in which acoustics helped to concentrate and enter an altered state of consciousness. Perhaps this knowledge was passed down from generation to generation and became part of sacred architecture. Interestingly, the acoustic effects of the Ajanta caves were studied by modern engineers and musicians. They recorded the sound of mantras and instruments, checked resonance, and echo. The results showed that the acoustics of the halls are indeed comparable to modern concert halls. But unlike the latter, everything here was created not with the help of complex calculations and technologies, but only by the intuition and experience of the masters. The Ajanta caves are also famous for their paintings. Scenes from the life of Buddha, images of gods, people, and animals have been preserved on the walls and ceilings. But if you look at them in combination with the acoustics, it becomes clear. The visual and auditory effects work together. When the light of the lamps illuminated the paintings and the sounds of mantras filled the hall, the space turned into a living meditation. All this adds to the mystery of the monument. Where did the ancient builders get such an understanding of sound? Were they conducting experiments to find the ideal proportions? Or was it part of a spiritual practice where the skill of building temples and the knowledge of vibrations were considered a single whole? There are versions that such effects could be used for teaching. Young monks, hearing their voice multiply and resonate in the hall, realized the power of the mantra faster. Thus, acoustics became not only a means of prayer, but also an educational tool. Today, the Ajanta caves are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Tourists and researchers come here to see the frescoes and feel the unusual sound of space. But even modern technology finds it difficult to explain how such an effect was achieved with the simple tools of stonecutters. Ajanta reminds us that ancient India knew how to combine art, religion, and science into a single whole. Here, sound became a bridge between man and the divine. And this is what makes the caves not only an architectural marvel, but also one of the greatest acoustic mysteries of antiquity. The Sun Temple at Konark and its stone calendar wheels. On the coast of the Bay of Bengal, in the Indian state of Orissa, stand the ruins of a temple that has long been called the Chariot of the Sun. The Sun Temple at Konark was built in the 13th century by King Narasimha Deva I, and was conceived as a giant stone chariot on which the god Surya would race across the heavens. Even in ruins, the temple is striking in its scale and detail, and its symbolism still causes controversy among historians and archaeologists. The main feature of Konark is the 12 giant stone wheels carved on the sides of the temple. Each wheel is 3 meters in diameter and consists of spokes decorated with intricate carvings. At first glance, they serve only as decorative elements emphasizing the image of the chariot. But careful observers have noticed that the wheels are positioned with such precision that they can function as a sundial. The shadow falling on the spokes shows the time with amazing accuracy. And some scientists believe that the temple could function as an entire calendar, recording not only hours, but also months and seasons. If this is true, then we have a unique combination of architecture, astronomy, and religion. The designers of the temple were driven not only by faith, but also by the desire to fit the cosmos into stone. This is a characteristic of the Indian tradition. Sacred space has always been connected with the movement of celestial bodies. The Temple of the Sun thus became not only a place of worship, but also an instrument for understanding time, connecting people with the cosmic order. But the mysteries of Konark do not end there. According to legend, the temple spire was topped with a giant magnet, thanks to which the iron parts of the structure were held without fasteners. The magnetic field was believed to be so strong that it affected ships passing near the coast, throwing off their compasses. Archaeologists have found no direct evidence for this story, but the fact that it existed shows what impression the temple made on its contemporaries. The temple was built of hard chlorite and sandstone, and at one time it rose to a height of over 70 meters. Its walls were decorated with hundreds of sculptures depicting gods, musicians, dancers, and mythical creatures. Many of them have survived to this day and are striking in their subtlety of execution. But the temple is also known for its explicit erotic sculpture, similar to that seen in Khajuraho. It remains a mystery to researchers. Why were scenes of intimate life depicted in the Temple of the Sun? Perhaps it reflected the idea of the unity of the cosmos and human existence, where even sensuality was considered part of the divine order. Over time, the temple began to deteriorate. Sea erosion, earthquakes, and raids are cited as the cause. By the 16th century, its central tower had collapsed, and the temple had lost its former grandeur. But even the ruins continue to inspire admiration. Today, Konark is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and remains one of the great mysteries of Indian architecture. What is hidden behind the image of the stone chariot? Was the temple in Konark just a monument to a religious cult dedicated to Surya? Or was it also a device that linked time, space, and man? Could the ancient masters have had knowledge of astronomy that we underestimate? Konark stands as a silent witness to the fact that for ancient India, a temple was not just a place of prayer, but an entire universe carved in stone. Its wheels still seem to turn in time, reminding us that the line between faith and science was much thinner in the past than we are accustomed to thinking. Brihadishvara and the mystery of lifting the giant Shikara. In the city of Thanjavur, in southern India, stands the Brihadishvara temple, one of the most grandiose structures of Dravidian architecture. Built in the 11th century by King Rajaraja Chola I, it became a symbol of the power of the Chola dynasty and the pinnacle of temple architecture in South India. But at the same time, the temple holds a secret that still amazes researchers. How did the ancient masters manage to erect a huge stone shikara weighing about 80 tons on its top? The temple tower rises to a height of over 60 meters and is crowned with a monolithic dome, shikara. This element is not just decorative, it symbolizes the mythical mountain, Meru, the center of the universe in Hindu cosmology. For the faithful, the shikara served as a visible embodiment of the connection between the earthly and the heavenly. And for architects, it was a formidable engineering challenge. How to lift such a massive stone block to such a height without modern cranes and machinery? There are several hypotheses. The most common one claims that the builders used a giant earthen ramp that stretched for several kilometers. The block was slowly pulled along it on sleds, using ropes, rollers, and the strength of hundreds of workers and animals. This version seems plausible, because a similar method was used in other cultures to transport heavy stones. But the question remains, where are the traces of this ramp? It must have been a grandiose structure, but archaeologists have not found any obvious remains. Another hypothesis suggests using a system of levers and wooden towers, where the block was raised gradually, floor by floor. Such a method would require incredible precision and coordination of actions, because any mistake could lead to the collapse of the entire structure. In addition, to lift such a heavy stone, ropes and mechanisms were needed that could withstand enormous loads. It is doubtful that such materials existed at that time in sufficient quality. There are also bolder versions. Some researchers believe that the block was installed at an early stage of construction, and everything else was built around it. But this method also seems dubious. The monolith is too massive to be left in place from the very beginning, without disrupting the work. Either way, the mystery remains unsolved. But one thing is clear. The builders of Brihadishvara had outstanding knowledge in the field of engineering and labor organization. The temple was built in a relatively short time, less than 10 years, which in itself is amazing. Apart from the shikara, the temple is famous for other features. Its walls are covered with exquisite carvings, and the frescoes inside tell of the king's exploits and mythological stories. The courtyard contains a giant statue of Nandi, Shiva's sacred bull, carved from a single stone. All this creates the impression that the temple was conceived as a stone universe, where every detail is symbolic and filled with sacred meaning. The mystery of the shikara only reinforces this feeling. For the inhabitants of the 11th century, its installation may have seemed like a miracle, a sign of divine help to the king. For us, however, it remains an example of how ancient masters solved problems that we are accustomed to consider only possible with modern technology. Today, the Brihadishvara Temple is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and continues to amaze pilgrims and scholars alike. Its majestic tower is visible from afar, and as one looks up at the monolithic shikara, one cannot help but wonder how these stone giants rose to the top, so that thousands of years later we can marvel at their beauty and mystery. Rani Ki Vav stepwell and its symbolism. In the western part of India, in the state of Gujarat, there is one of the most amazing structures of medieval architecture, the stepwell Rani Ki Vav. Built in the 11th century by Queen Udayamati in memory of her husband, the ruler Bhima I of the Solanki dynasty, it is not just a source of water, but also a symbolic space where engineering intertwines with mythology. Today, the well is included in the UNESCO World Heritage List and is considered a masterpiece of underground architecture in India. At first glance, Rani Ki Vav is a huge shaft more than 20 meters deep, with 7 levels of terraces and galleries leading to it. The steps lead down a complex system of staircases, and the walls are decorated with more than 1,000 sculptures. Each of them depicts gods, celestial beings, avatars of Vishnu, and scenes from Hindu myths. Diving into the well turned into not only a physical descent to the water, but also a symbolic journey into the depths of the universe. The well served several functions. It was practically a source of water for the residents of Patan. In the arid climate of Gujarat, such structures played a crucial role, allowing rainwater to be collected and stored for months. But at the same time, Rani Ki Vav was also a temple. Each terrace, each level led deeper, from light to darkness, from the earthly to the sacred. Water in the Hindu tradition symbolized purification and rebirth, and the descent to it was perceived as a ritual connecting man with the divine. The symbolism of the well is particularly vivid in the central sculptural program. On the lower levels are images of Vishnu and his 10 avatars, from the Matsya fish to Krishna and Rama. This sequence seemed to tell of the cycles of time and the constant rebirth of the universe. The descent became a spiritual journey where one passed through mythological stages to reach pure water, symbolizing truth and liberation. The engineering solution is also impressive. The well was built from carefully processed sandstone blocks, connected without mortar. A system of steps allowed many people to approach the water at the same time, and beams and arches strengthened the structure, preventing collapse. Even after 1,000 years, a significant part of the structure has survived, which testifies to the skill of the builders. But the history of Rani Ki Vav was not always bright. In the 13th century, the well was filled with silt after floods and forgotten for almost 7 centuries. Only in the 19th century, British archaeologists began to clear it, and the real restoration was carried out already in the 20th century. Thanks to this, today we can see the well almost as it was intended. The mystery of Rani Ki Vav is that it combines contradictory elements. On the one hand, it is a utilitarian structure designed to provide water. On the other, it is a temple filled with sculptures and symbolism. For the inhabitants of ancient Patan, every morning when they went down to fetch water became an act of religious worship. The everyday and the sacred intertwined, erasing the boundaries between everyday life and spiritual practice. Today, Rani Ki Vav amazes not only tourists but also researchers. Its sculptures allow us to study the aesthetics and iconography of the Solanki dynasty, its architecture demonstrates virtuoso mastery of engineering techniques, and its symbolism reminds us that in ancient India, even the most practical structures could be transformed into a path to eternity. Rani Ki Vav is not just a well. It is a stone book that tells how people of the 11th century saw the world, as an endless journey downwards, to the source of life, and to divine truth. Geometry of Sri Yantra and its possible secret functions. Among the symbols of ancient India, a special place is occupied by the Sri Yantra, a complex geometric figure consisting of 9 intertwined triangles, forming in total 43 smaller triangles. It is surrounded by lotuses and squares with 4 gates facing the cardinal directions. At first glance, this is simply an exquisite pattern, but in the Indian tradition, it is perceived as a sacred diagram capable of connecting human consciousness with the divine order. The main mystery of the Sri Yantra is its mathematical precision. The interweaving of triangles forms a perfect symmetry, where each line is subject to strict proportions. Modern researchers note that it is extremely difficult to construct such a figure manually. Even with the help of computers, precise calculations are required so that the lines do not diverge and all the angles coincide. But in the Indian tradition, this pattern was created for centuries by craftsmen without any devices, on stone, paper, metal, or in ritual sand. Metal, Sri Yantra symbolizes the unity of male and female principles, the interaction of space and matter. 4 triangles directed upwards represent the male principle, Shiva, and 5 triangles directed downwards represent the female principle, Shakti. In the center is a dot bindu, a symbol of the original beginning and the highest reality. In Indian philosophy, this center is perceived as a point where the energy of the universe is concentrated, and to which the meditator strives. But the Sri Yantra also holds more practical mysteries. Some researchers believe that its geometry is linked to ancient knowledge in astronomy and mathematics. The lines of the pattern are seen to have ratios close to the golden section and the number pi. Perhaps this diagram served not only as a religious symbol, but also as a tool for cognition, a kind of cosmic map with which priests and astronomers explain the structure of the world. There's also a version that Sri Yantra was used as a psychotechnical tool. Concentration on complex geometry helped to distract the consciousness from external concerns and immersed a person in a state of meditation. When the gaze slides over triangles, circles, and lotuses, attention gradually concentrates in the center, in the bindu point. This process symbolizes the path from the chaos of multitude to unity, from the external to the internal, from the material to the spiritual. There are also mystical interpretations. In the Tantric tradition, the Sri Yantra was considered the key to awakening the Kundalini energy hidden in the human body. Meditation on the diagram could supposedly open access to hidden powers and even change the perception of time and space. Such practices were passed from teacher to student and were surrounded by mystery. Archaeologists have found images of the Sri Yantra on stones and temple walls, confirming its importance for the religious and cultural life of India. But the exact time of its appearance remains unknown. Some scientists believe that the symbol appeared no later than the first millennium BC, while others are sure that its roots go much deeper, perhaps to the culture of the Indus civilization. Modern mathematicians and physicists are also interested in the Sri Yantra. Some see in its structure analogies with fractals and models of multidimensional space. Its symmetry inspires architects, artists, and researchers trying to unravel the universal laws of harmony. But it remains unclear to what extent the ancient masters were aware of the mathematical nature of the symbol, or whether they acted on intuition and religious beliefs. The Sri Yantra remains a living symbol today. It is used in temples, in yoga, in meditation. It decorates altars, amulets, and paintings. But behind this beauty lies something more, a challenge to our understanding of how ancient cultures integrated art, science, and spirituality into a single system. Thus, the mystery of the Sri Yantra lies not only in its origin and mathematical complexity. It embodies the idea that the world can be expressed through geometry, and that lines and shapes can be a bridge between man and the cosmos. For ancient India, it was not just a pattern, but a universal language with which to speak about the eternal. Jantar-mantar and stone astronomical instruments. In the center of Jaipur, the Rose City in the Indian state of Rajasthan, stands an unusual architectural complex, Jantar-mantar. At first glance, its monumental structures resemble abstract sculptures or the scenery of a science fiction film. But in fact, it is one of the most amazing astronomical observatories in the world, built in the 18th century by Maharaja Jai Singh II. Despite its relatively young age, Jantar-mantar continues to keep a secret. How was it possible to achieve such precision of observations using only stone, marble, and metal, without telescopes and lenses? The complex consists of more than 20 instruments, each with a special shape and purpose. The most impressive is the Samrat Yantra, a giant sundial 27 meters high. Its shadow moves with such precision that it allows the time to be determined with an error of only 2 seconds. For the 18th century, when Europe already had Newton's and Galileo's telescopes, such precision in a stone clock seems incredible. Other instruments of the complex were intended for measuring the position of stars, the movement of planets, and predicting eclipses. For example, the Jaipur Jai Prakash Yantra is a recessed hemisphere with a grid of coordinates. When the observer stood in the center, he could see the exact position of the celestial bodies in the sky. The instruments were so carefully calculated that even today astronomers use them to demonstrate to students. But the mystery of Jantar-mantar is not just about engineering. It is also about philosophy. Jai Singh II was not just a ruler, but also a scientist, deeply fascinated by astronomy and mathematics. His goal was not just about measurement, but also about merging science with tradition. He sought to confirm and refine the data of ancient Indian astronomical texts, such as the Surya Siddhanta, using new methods. As a result, Jantar-mantar became not just an observatory, but a kind of bridge between ancient knowledge and modernity. It remains a mystery how such high precision in construction was achieved. Stone tools had to have ideal angles and surfaces. The slightest deviation would change the results of measurements. But the masters of Jaipur coped with this task, working with huge massifs of marble and sandstone. Many researchers assume that they used special methods of verification and marking, which have not been fully studied. There is another mystery. Despite the precision of the instruments, many of them were never widely used for scientific discoveries. Perhaps it is because Europe soon gave the world new telescopic methods that allowed them to see what was inaccessible to stone instruments. But in India, Jantar-mantar remained a symbol of the desire to connect space and architecture. The form of the structures is striking in its monumentality and symbolism. It seems that these are not just instruments, but temples of science. Their scale inspired respect for the cosmos, and their use turned into a ritual. For the inhabitants of Jaipur, they were not only a technical achievement, but also an expression of a worldview where observing the sky was an act of spiritual quest. Today, Jantar-mantar is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It continues to amaze tourists and researchers, and its giant clock and hemispheres still work. For us, It is a reminder that science can be embodied not only in laboratories and instruments, but also in stone transformed into architecture. The mystery of Jantar Mantar is that it demonstrates that even without sophisticated technology, humans could find ways to measure time and the movement of stars with stunning accuracy. It is a legacy where geometry and belief in the harmony of the universe took material form, and where astronomy became part of architecture and spiritual quest. Underwater Dwarka and coincidences with the legends of Mahabharata. Off the coast of the Indian state of Gujarat, in the waters of the Arabian Sea, archaeologists have discovered what many consider one of the most astonishing discoveries of recent decades: sunken ruins known as underwater Dwarka. Legends about the city of Dwarka, built by Krishna himself, occupy an important place in the epic Mahabharata. According to the texts, this city was built on the coast and shone with golden palaces, but after Krishna's death, it sank under the water. For a long time, these stories were considered myths, but excavations at the bottom of the sea unexpectedly revived old legends. The first underwater explorations off the coast of Dwarka began in the 1980s. Indian archaeologists discovered stone blocks, foundations and structures resembling walls and piers. Some of the finds date back to the 3rd to 2nd millennium BC, which is remarkably time corresponding to the Indus civilization. The finds include anchors, pottery, stone tools, and household items, indicating that there was indeed a developed settlement here. Comparisons of these artifacts with the descriptions from the Mahabharata have generated much debate. The epic describes Dwarka as a city built on water and divided into quarters filled with temples and palaces. Underwater ruins found off the coast also show signs of planning. Straight lines, geometric shapes, structures that clearly could not have arisen by chance. This has led some researchers to speculate that the legend may have a historical basis. However, opponents of this theory point out that the evidence is still insufficient. The dating of the artifacts remains controversial, and underwater research is complicated by currents and limited visibility. Many of the stone blocks could be natural formations that only resemble ruins. Nevertheless, the number of finds continues to grow, and each new expedition adds arguments in favor of the fact that a large port city once existed on the site of modern Dwarka. One of the most striking finds was stone anchors, similar to those used in Mesopotamia and Egypt. This points to possible trade links between the Indus Valley civilization and other great Bronze Age cultures. If Dwarka was such a center, its sinking would have been a regional catastrophe that left a deep mark on the people. What could have caused the city's demise? Archaeologists suggest that the cause was a sharp change in sea level. The waters of the Arabian Sea could have risen due to tectonic shifts or melting glaciers. Similar catastrophes are known in other regions, and they often became the basis for myths about sunken cities. For the inhabitants of ancient India, the disappearance of Dwarka could have been seen as a punishment from the gods, or as a mystical event associated with the death of Krishna. Today, underwater Dwarka remains the subject of active research. Indian archaeologists continue to survey the bottom using sonar and underwater robots, but there are no final conclusions yet. For some, this is confirmation of ancient texts. For others, it is a coincidence. But in any case, the findings indicate that the Indian coast in ancient times was much more developed than previously thought. The mystery of Dwarka reminds us that the line between myth and history is not always clear. Perhaps the Mahabharata epic preserved the memory of a real city lost in the sea. Or perhaps we are merely superimposing our expectations on the traces of ancient settlements. But one thing is clear. Water hides secrets that can rewrite ideas about India's past. Underwater Dwarka is myth and archaeology, legend and science at the same time. It combines texts that have inspired believers for millennia with finds that can be touched with your hands. And it is in this combination that the feeling is born, that myths sometimes contain more truth than we are ready to admit. The mysterious standardized weights and measures of Harappa. One of the most astonishing discoveries made by archaeologists studying the cities of the Indus civilization were tiny weights and measuring cubes made with astonishing precision. They were found in Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and other settlements and indicate that more than 4,000 years ago, the inhabitants of the Indus Valley used a single system of measures and weights. For the Bronze Age, this seems incredible. After all, standardization presupposes a highly organized society and a wide trade network. But why did they need such precision? And why did this system disappear along with the civilization itself? Harappan weights are most often made of hard stone, chlorite, jasper, or quartzite. They have a regular cube shape and are distinguished by their exceptionally fine processing. The weight of each corresponds to a certain standard, a multiple of the basic module of about 13.7 grams. Lighter and heavier samples fit exactly into multiple values, which indicates a strict metric system. Some scales were so small that they could not be used without special equipment, indicating that the Harappans were able to work with microscopic quantities of precious materials. The mystery is that this system was the same in different cities, hundreds of kilometers apart. This suggests centralized control, or at least strong cultural coordination. Traders and artisans from different regions used the same standards, which made it easier to exchange goods. But who implemented such a system and how? We have no answers in the written sources, and the archaeological evidence only shows the result, a surprising unification. These weights were apparently used to measure not only grain or metals but also more valuable materials, gold, silver, and stones for jewelry. This is indicated by the finds of bead and jewelry workshops next to sets of weights. Such crafts required the highest precision, and the Harappans achieved it. Some scholars believe that it was this culture that gave rise to the idea of exact weight in trade, which later spread throughout the world. The system of length measures is no less curious. Archaeologists have discovered ivory measuring rulers with divisions made with an accuracy of 1.7 millimeters. For the Bronze Age, this is an incredible level of accuracy. Moreover, these divisions correspond to the proportions used in the planning of streets and buildings. It turns out that cities were built according to pre-calculated modules, and not chaotically. And yet the central question remains, why did such a perfect system disappear? When the Indus civilization declined, so did standardization. Later Indian cultures did not preserve these weights and measures intact. Perhaps the collapse of trade and the drying up of rivers destroyed the need for a unified system. Perhaps the very idea of centralized control was lost along with the cultural tradition. There is also a more mystical version. Some researchers believe that uniform measures had not only practical, but also sacred significance. In ancient cultures, numbers and proportions were often associated with cosmic order. If this is so, then the Harappan weights could symbolize not only trade, but also the harmony of the world, and the disappearance of this system became not just an economic, but also a spiritual crisis. Today, the small stone cubes from Harappa are kept in museums and look modest, but their simplicity hides a huge mystery. How did Bronze Age people create and maintain such a precise system? Why was it important to them? And why did they lose it, leaving their descendants without an explanation? These standardized weights and measures remain silent testimony to the fact that the Indus civilization was far more complex and advanced than is commonly believed. It managed exchange, crafts, and construction with a precision that even today commands respect. And the fact that we still do not understand all the reasons for its decline only underscores that we are confronted with one of the great mysteries of ancient India. Polishing of Ashokan pillars and its secret. In many parts of India and neighboring countries, there are majestic stone pillars built by order of Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BCE. These columns, erected after his conversion to Buddhism, were meant to bring the world the ideas of Dharma, the law of justice and nonviolence. They were carved with inscriptions with decrees and instructions calling for peace, compassion, and care for subjects. But the pillars themselves conceal a mystery that amazes even modern researchers. Their surface is polished so perfectly that it resembles the shine of metal or glass. The polish of the Ashokan pillars has been a subject of admiration and controversy since the 19th century, when archaeologists began to actively study them. Many of them are made of hard sandstone or granite, which are very difficult to process. But the craftsmen managed to achieve a mirror-like smoothness, and this surface has been preserved for more than 2,000 years. Even today, in the sunlight, you can see the reflection on the columns. How was it possible to achieve such an effect without modern tools and technology? The most common version says that ancient craftsmen used special abrasives, sand, quartz, possibly powder of semi-precious stones. They were applied during the grinding process, gradually smoothing the surface. But this explanation is not entirely satisfactory. The amount of work was colossal. The columns reach a height of 12 meters and weigh tens of tons. Polishing them manually to such a state is a nearly impossible task. Some researchers suggest that the secret was in a special technique that was lost over time. Perhaps chemical compounds based on plant juices or minerals were used, which corroded the top layer of stone and made it more pliable for processing. There is no evidence for this yet, but the idea that lost technologies existed in ancient times seems plausible. The fact of transportation is no less mysterious. The columns were cut in quarries, sometimes hundreds of kilometers away from the place of installation. They were transported by land and rivers and then installed vertically while maintaining the ideal surface. The slightest mistake could damage the polish, but the columns have reached us in almost perfect condition. This suggests that the process was carefully organized and controlled at all stages. Symbolism also plays an important role. The mirror-like smoothness of the columns emphasized their sacred nature. In the Buddhist tradition, shine was associated with purity and truth. People who saw the reflection of light on the pillars felt the presence of a higher power. Thus, polishing was not only a technical technique, but also an element of spiritual influence. Some pillars are topped with capitals in the shape of lions, bulls, or elephants, executed with the same care. The most famous of these is the lion capital from Sarnath, which has become a national symbol of India. Its finish and smoothness of surface are in no way inferior to the columns themselves. This once again proves that the craftsmen had a technique that allowed them to achieve an effect unachievable for most other ancient cultures. Comparisons with other civilizations only add to the mystery. Egypt and Mesopotamia also knew how to polish stone, but not on such a large scale or with such durability. The Ashokan pillars show no signs of rough processing. They look as if they were made with tools we simply do not know. Today, the polishing of the Ashokan columns remains one of the unsolved mysteries of history. We can only speculate about the methods used by the craftsmen. Was it secret abrasive mixtures, chemical processes, or incredible manual dexterity? Whatever the case, the fact remains that 2,500 years later, the columns still sparkle in the sun, reminding us that ancient India possessed knowledge and skills that we do not fully understand. The mysteries of ancient India remain open books of stone and water, whose pages we have not yet learned to read. Writing, temples, cities, and symbols continue to keep secrets, reminding us that the history of humanity is deeper and more complex than any of our ideas about the past.